Call this meeting to order. Rick, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you, Ann. Would you call the roll, please?
Vice Mayor Saleh is absent. Mayor-elect Leiter.
Here.
Mr. Reiner.
Here.
Mr. Keenan. Ms. Genesee Zerker. Here. Mrs. Boring. Here. And Mr. Gerber.
Here. Great, thank you. Okay, we'll begin the meeting with citizen comments regarding matters not on this evening's agenda. And the first individual that has signed up in that regard is Mike Bickley. If you'd like to come forward, please. You state your name and address for the record, please.
Michael Bickley, 5839 Morey Court, Dublin. Mr. Mayor, Council, I'll talk about the Muirfield fence proposal, something that we've been dealing with for a couple of months. We're now talking about a temporary or seasonal fence, which still has some concerns for the residents. Dublin Fence Code, as I understand it, does not provide for a temporary fence. Dublin Fence Code specifically, 153.01.6c, says that permanent fence and a temporary fence are the same thing. There is no temporary fence code, as I can understand, or that Mr. Smith could explain to me. 153.079b5 says a wrought iron fence, again in plain English, may not have pointed ends. Very clear. 153.080 says a 4-foot height is the maximum fence. And 153.083 says that existing or more restrictive PUD zoning takes precedent. And of course, Muirfield PUD zoning is more restrictive. These 5 provisions in our code are pretty simple, pretty plain English. I was surprised and pleased when I read them online. I'd ask council just to read the same 5 things and see if they have a different interpretation. The temporary fence is a problem for a couple of reasons. One, it's the wrong fence. I don't know if members of council had a chance during a tournament to go out and visit the fence. There's a sample in 18 that they invited us to come and see and make comments on. I did inspect it. It's a wrong fence. It won't work. It will fail quickly, or fairly quickly, and cause some problems. First problem is, as the fence fails, you'll lose components and things will be, kids will climb the fence. You cannot stop kids climbing fences. And as it becomes loose and it becomes more dangerous. Secondly, it's our belief that as the fence starts to fail, the golf club will come back and tell you that the fence is failing. Surprise. And that they will ask for a variance or a waiver or tell you that they cannot take the fence down because it's failing. The manufacturer says the fence is the wrong fence. I met with Steve Langworthy this morning and gave him the details and specifications as well as correspondence with the fence manufacturer stating that it's the wrong fence, they will not warranty it, and it will fail. So the fence is a problem generally, but this fence specifically is a problem. And it's really unusual for a city to allow somebody to install a product against the manufacturer's recommendation without some independent engineering study, and maybe that's an appropriate tool here. I think the fence code is clear. I met with Mr. Smith last week, and my interpretation, maybe it's incorrect, was that the fence code was a guideline and it's not really a code. I couldn't disagree more. I look at Dublin and the work you people do and do a great job. Look at things like the sign code, look at different codes, and the starting place is always the code. People can come and get variances, people can make changes, but the starting point is the code. I would ask council to look at the code, apply the code, and deal with it. This is a big fence. This is 7 miles of fence. You look at Dublin code. In the sign code, we talk about garage sale signs, 2 square feet. This fence is 185,000 square feet of black metal fence with pointed ends. How big is that? That's 3.5 football fields. We could cover all 3 high school football fields, goal line to goal line, sideline to sideline, with black metal fence with pointed ends, have enough left over for 2 baseball fields. This is huge. The scope and the scale is unprecedented in Dublin, and I think it takes some serious consideration. I'm asking Dublin to take a look at it. I mean, I think that the golf club needs a solution. They need a fence for the President's Cup. We accept that. The President's Cup is coming in 3.5 months. We need to deal with this fairly quickly. And I think there's some negotiated settlement could be made, but clearly this fence today is not the right fence. So I'd ask you to have a look at that and be good. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Maurer?
Wallace Maurer, 7451 Dublin Road. I have some qualms about the next issue. I do not have, I tell you right from the outset that I don't have the credentials to really to raise the question, but you might remember in the golden age of my appearance up here, that never stopped me. But at any rate, when I sometimes lived in Los Angeles, I was, when driving on surface roads as distinct from the freeways, I'd sometimes get caught at a stoplight, but it was so long that I was under an overpass. And I had heard enough tremors to be concerned about that. Well, something like that here I'm thinking about in the city of Dublin, which I ran into the other day. As I say, I don't have the credentials for this, but can you tell me when was the last time that the appropriate city or county or state or federal agency tested the strength of the bridge running over the river on 161?
Mr. Maurer, we would ask the city manager or the city engineer to answer that question for you.
Yeah. And we do work with ODOT as well as the county engineers on the bridges, and we have annual bridge inspection process that we use at the city for the bridges that we're responsible for. Paul and I just had a conversation about this last week, and that we would be providing sometime in the near future the bridge report on the city's bridges. But as far as the I-270 bridge, we can provide that update.
Yeah, I said, it struck me the other day, suppose you have a flow of traffic going in one way, including a couple of semis, and there's a traffic issue in front which causes, in effect, an almost simultaneous braking, putting on the brakes of all the vehicles. I wonder whether it would hold up under that. That bridge initially, of course, was not built for the massive amount of traffic it has every morning and every evening and all through the day. So, and there have been, bridges failing all across the country at the moment. And there's an exceptional amount of traffic crowds. Right, all right, you're going to look into it, I suppose. Second, I had a number of issues here. The second one really goes straight to the potential marketing power of this city. Let me start with a question on that. You remember after last year's, remember the Polish American Society did a big show here last year when they dedicated the place for a Polish general who had helped Washington protect the country. And when I was over, I remember I asked here in council whether it'd be a good idea if we invited them back again because they put on a terrific show. So that's my initial question. And I think I asked it here one night, have they been contacted at all to come back?
I don't know. We'll have to follow up and get back with you.
You what?
We'll have to follow up and get back. I don't know.
Oh, okay, okay. I'm in.
Excuse me, Mr. Maurer, I can't speak for anyone else, but, my recollection was that that was a one-time event having to do with the dedication of the park.
I know,
Not,
right.
not necessarily something to be repeated.
And it did raise the issue of expanding the marketing power of this city by having festivals given by ethnic groups in the city.
And Ms. Maurer, I don't want to belabor too much at this point, and I think we appreciate what you're saying, but there's significant expense associated with that sort of thing, and time and energy, and the potential need to hire more staff, and so forth. So I mean that's a bigger undertaking than maybe you might imagine. But please go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch the drift of what you're saying. You mean there's too much expense connected with?
I'm just suggesting that that's something to consider.
Yeah, but one looks ahead to potential. And, I've raised this before, and you're getting uneasy, and you don't like to hear it. There is potential here for all kinds of ethnic groups in the city to develop a festival. This has nothing to do with being opposed to the Irish festival. As a matter of fact, you might remember I argued for having this be the Western Hemisphere Center for Irish Literature.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt once again, but I think I'm recalling now that, I'll give you 30 more seconds. I'm recalling now that we talked about these organizations taking responsibility if they were so inclined, and, but that we weren't going to take the major responsibility for that. So again, I'm sorry.
Okay, my time's up, but
You've got another 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Really?
Sure. Don't waste it.
On another topic.
Huh? On another topic? Well, no, you were worried last 2 weeks ago when I thought I might be running for office here. I don't do it, not because I would win. I can assure you I'd win. I can know what part of the city to tap into to get backing. There's a whole undercurrent of people that you're unaware of when you politic around here. At any rate, I don't run for office because I'm not going to come in here and have a 6-1 vote every night, half a dozen of them, the way my former wife did when she was in here, and she had to drag this whole council bodily into the National League of Cities.
Oh, boy.
You had enough for tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Mauer.
What's that?
No.
No? You want more?
Thank you. Oh.
I'll be back.
Thank you. We look forward to it. Thank you very much. All right. All right. Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda. We have 7 items this evening. Would ask council members whether they wish to remove any one or more of those items. Hearing that, I would move that council approve the actions requested for the 7 items listed on this evening's consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm seeing a gentleman at the podium here.
Mr. Leckliter, may I speak as a citizen for a moment?
Okay.
I got it a little too late to sign. I'll only take 2 or 3 minutes of your time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Your name, sir?
My name is Bruce McLaughlin. I live at 5131 Brand Road,
Okay.
which is 4 houses east of Kaufman and Brand.
Okay. Excuse, just a minute. This isn't on an item on this evening's
It is
agenda.
not.
Okay.
No,
Please go ahead.
it is not about an item on the agenda.
Sure. Go ahead.
We've lived at Brand Road, on Brand Road, for almost 33 years, and I just want you to know that it's coming to the point where it's going to be nightmare on Brand Road. For the last year, it seems like this council has had a war on the residents of Brand Road, and I just want you to know how we view it. Tonight, you're going to take land from all my neighbors, including the right-of-way that we own, that everybody owns. You're down at Kaufman and Brand now, and nobody can cut trees down in Dublin when they're going to do a development. But you guys tore all the trees out, boom, right away for your roundabout. It seems like there's a set of principles that apply to everybody except this council, and I don't quite understand it. I see my neighbors down Brand Road going west. There's stakes all through their front yards where you're going to put a multi-use path right up to their front doors in many cases. You're tearing all the bushes out at me and Neil Hahn's place. You're coming down the road. Mrs. Ott is very heavy-handed in her negotiations about this roundabout. She's been after the Spears. She's been after all the neighbors. And now she's apparently threatening to come after the right-of-way in front of our house as soon as she gets done beating everybody up here tonight on the pieces of property that are directly adjacent to the roundabout. And I just would like to ask, and the Dublin Baptist Church across the street that owns the Ark that's supposed to be a Nazarene church and is now a teenage hangout, tells me that they're negotiating with Verizon to put a cell tower in our backyard. Now, I'm going to ask you folks to understand the people on Brand Road, we thought we were kind of a special group, a scenic road and all the things we've talked about. And suddenly it seems like no matter what happens, everybody thinks it's okay to beat up on the people on Brand Road. And I don't know if we can do anything about it, but I'd just like you to know what it looks like to us as residents as we continue to see you come after us and come after us. When Mrs. Ott comes to talk to us about taking our right away, we're We're going to be very unhappy about that because it's going to take our ground from 2 acres to under 2 acres, and those have major implications. So there's implications to all this for people coming down Brand Road, and I would like you to ask Mrs. Ott to leave us alone, please.
Thank you.
You know, I'd like to just make a couple comments with respect to that. I travel, you don't need to come back up. I travel up and down Brand Road just about every day, and I think that the Brand Road roundabout, everybody that travels that, including the neighbors, would say that's a very good thing. It's a very dangerous intersection. We have children running through there, high school, people in cars. That's a problem. We've also, this council spent a lot of money in the preservation of the Brand Road corridor, not the least of which was the Wallace property, which we spent the better part of $750,000, $800,000 to preserve that, as opposed to letting it go into a condominium development or housing development to put more traffic on the road. And there's other negotiations going on along Brand Road for kind of similar things. So, you know, I know people are upset about the bike path. I have one behind me in my home in Coventry Woods. And initially I wasn't real happy about it either. But I will tell you, it's an asset to the community. Whether you like it or not, it's been a stated goal of this council for many, many years that we would have connectivity and the bike paths would be throughout this city, and that's what's happened, and that's what continues to happen. So I appreciate your comments. I understand. I have a business here. I also had butted heads with the city with respect to some sign code. I don't like government telling me what to do, but there are certain things government has to do. And I'm telling you, that roundabout's an extremely important one, and the land preservation in that corridor has been extremely important as well. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Moving back to our consent agenda, was there a second?
Yes,
Yes.
need a second, yes.
All right, thank you. Ann, if you call for the vote, please.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring? Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Thank you. Our agenda lists what is described as a postponed ordinance, that's ordinance 39-13.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a development and tax increment financing agreement with Vrabel Landholding Dublin LLC related to the development of approximately 6.15 acres of real estate generally located to the east of Riverside Drive, west of Teller Ridge Drive, and south and adjacent to Teller Road.
Thank you. Is this essentially, this is the second reading on this?
It is, and the staff report just pointed out some of the subtle changes that were made between the last time and now.
Okay,
I can answer any questions you might have about this.
okay. Did you have anything else to add?
Not particularly, other than we find that the suggested changes, as I outlined in the staff report, are relatively minor in nature. Some name changes, pushback to the date relative to the completion of the skilled nursing facility. We didn't have an issue with that. And then the potential need for an access drive at some point. If the developer wants it, then we just put in there, if the developer wants that access drive, they can put it in at their expense.
Council members have any questions?
I don't have a question about this one, but after we voted, I'd like to ask another question related to skilled nursing.
Okay.
Okay. Ann, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mrs. Boring? Yes. Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Thank you.
If I might ask just a follow-up question, not related again specifically to this case, but as we all know, we've had a number of nursing-type facilities, and they've run the gamut in terms of the purposes of them come before us in the last 24 months, and I think there might be still some to come before us in the near future. I was wondering if we have, or someone, perhaps the Hospital Association or some other kind of membership-based organization, has done an actual study that we could have a copy of that suggests what is the need in this part of the Franklin County for facilities of this type. It just seems like we had 2 on Post Road for a long time, and now we're getting a substantial number of them. And I'm just curious as to wanting to ensure that the need is as great as the number of beds and the different types of services that they're going to be offering?
First of all, I'm not privy to any such study particularly. However, having had a conversation with many of these different folks coming to town wanting to develop these, one, I've kind of been educated to the nuances that each one has.
Right.
They certainly serve different types of populations and so forth. They have different skill bases they bring and serve various needs, and there's a full spectrum of that. Also, I think it's very responsive to the changing demographic that we're seeing nationally, and they're responding to that market as well. So that's about the best I could offer, but we'll certainly ask around, see if we can find if there's any kind of information like that out there.
I'm
Or
wondering-
perhaps these developers, we could ask a couple of them if they'd be willing to share some of their
I'd
information.
appreciate that. I know that in many of these cases, they are responding to the baby boomer generation, of course.
Right.
But still, my concern is the number of them, number of beds,
Yep.
and the diversity of the services in this part of town.
The other thing I would add, and I don't know the intricate details of this, and I don't want to call Mr. Hale out, but he just might have more experience with it representing these folks, is that the licensing of the beds is pretty critical, and that the state highly regulates that. So there has to be a lot of market analysis behind these before they can get those allocation of licensed beds. So I know that plays a huge role in the location of these, and that's looked at from other perspectives and other agencies as to how those licenses are allocated throughout the state. So.
Mr. Hale, would you come forward, please? And I apologize, I should have given you the opportunity to speak to
I
this
didn't have
before we
anything
voted. Okay.
I mean, one of the things that's been going on in the state this has happened over the last couple of years, all these places, you do have to get a certificate of need. But the state did a study a few years ago, and what they found was that Central Ohio was pretty substantially underbedded, and that the rest of the state had too many beds. And so one of the things that they did about 2 years ago was allow people to either transfer beds that they own or buy beds in other parts of the state and transfer them into Central Ohio. Dublin in particular, I know, I can't remember whether this was part of that study or whether it was another client of mine did the study, but there was also, in terms of standards, the northwestern part of Franklin County, both in terms of nursing homes and congregate care and those kind of things, were underbedded in terms of what people think are necessary to service the population. So I think one of the reasons you're seeing that, I think it's twofold. I think these studies do show that you're somewhat underbedded, and number two, the state study that allowed these transfers. You still have to get the approval from the state, but the state came to the conclusion that there clearly was overbedding in other parts of the state and underbedding in Central Ohio.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we can figure out a way to get you that information if you want it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Moving on to the second reading of ordinances, ordinance 40-13.
Adopting the proposed tax budget for fiscal year 2014.
Thank you. Ms. Muma.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. We are requesting passage of the 2014 tax budget. As outlined in your staff memo, we are required to file this with both Delaware and Franklin counties in order to receive our local government funding. Just to give you an overview, our income tax revenue for 2014 at this very early stage, we are projecting to remain consistent with what we are anticipating for 2013. This is consistent with our conservative nature in planning income tax revenues. With the loss of Verizon, we want to make sure that we are protected and we are not overstating revenue. While certainly we have some potential for growth with some additional companies, we want to be conservative at this stage in the game. On the expense side, we have, generally speaking, budgeted a 2.5% increase. So the net effect of this still maintains a general fund balance well in excess of our 50% reserve. That is our guideline. It would, in fact, put it at a little bit over 80%. As indicated in your council memo, the allocation of the inside millage is consistent with what we had put forward in the 2013 through 2017 CIP, and that's consistent with years past, which puts 0.35 mils in parkland acquisition and 1.4 in the capital improvement fund. This certainly still provides council the flexibility to pay for parkland acquisition out of capital funds if the need arises. With that, I will answer any questions that you might have.
Excuse me, council members have any questions? Hearing none, Ann, if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Nissy Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
And Mrs. Waring?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. Ordinance 41-13.
Authorizing the city manager to execute necessary conveyance documentation to acquire 0.765 acres, more or less fee simple interest, from Joseph V. and Corrine Berger.
Thank you, Ms. Ott.
Good evening. This is the acquisition of right-of-way for the eventual widening of Avery Road near Rings Road. The city has acquired additional parcels in this area. We've came to amicable price point with this property owner and recommend approval.
Any questions? Hearing none, Ann, if you call for the vote.
Mr. Nissy Zerker? Mrs. Waring? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Thank you. Ordinance 42-13.
Authorizing the city manager to execute necessary conveyance documentation to accept the dedication of a 0.420 acre more or less fee simple interest, all of which is present road occupied, from Brand Road Investment Company Limited.
Thank you. Ms. Ott.
This is an additional section of roadway, present road occupied along Brand Road, that is being dedicated from an easement into permanent right-of-way for the city.
And worth pointing out that the owner is not asking to be paid anything, is that correct?
Correct. When we contacted this owner, they actually were not realizing that they still had title to this area. It was a residual piece from an earlier lot split, and we're comfortable going ahead and making the dedication to the city.
Okay, good. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, Ann, if you call for the vote.
Mr. Keenan? Yes. Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Mr. Nissy Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Sarah, do we send out a letter thanking these people when we don't have to pay acquisition costs for acquiring this, or what do we do in that case?
So we've had conversation with this particular owner to thank them because it's present road occupied. Its cash value is $1, and we cover all of the recording fees associated with it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to ordinance 43-13.
Authorizing the city manager to execute necessary conveyance documentation to acquire 0.280 acre more or less fee simple interest, of which 0.184 acre more or less is present road occupied, 0.009 acre more or less temporary construction easement, and a 0.028 acre more or less temporary construction easement from Jerry Garland Spears III and Marcia M. Spears, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Ms. Ott, anything?
Sure. Take just a moment to put up a visual for you. This is the realignment and intersection improvement at Kaufman and Brand Roads. Just to orient you, this is Kaufman right here, and this is Brand Road along here. And as you can see, to install the roundabout, the intersection is being moved to the north. This was to minimize impact to residential properties. It takes approximately 3/4 to an acre of the land from the Wallace tract that was purchased in 2012 to accomplish that, and still meet the geometric requirements of the roundabout. This will be a great intersection improvement in reducing speeds as well as addressing a crash history that we have at this intersection. The particular ordinance in front of you today is for the Spears property, which is in the north side of the project right here. We were able to work with the Spears and their representative over the past several months to come to the agreement for what you see before you. Tonight, before you is legislation for each of the impacted properties with this project, and the Spears here being the first one. We're requesting emergency on these. We have on the city property, and where we have obtained right of entries from property owners, begun tree removal this week that is necessary for the improvement. We will be doing utility relocates later this month and anticipate bringing you on June 24th a bid acceptance for the general contractor for the project. This will also include an intersection closure in July through late fall to allow construction to be done as quickly as possible before winter weather sets in.
And the one other item too that will occur as part of this project is the burying of the overhead utilities from where they currently.
Sure, that currently it's from approximately, they'll be buried from approximately here to about here.
Got an estimate on the cost to bury those utilities? I know it's not cheap.
Oh, where are we? Maybe, our estimate's maybe $500,000?
Yeah.
Between $300,000 and $400,000 for the burials, what we're expecting back
Good.
on our bids.
I think it's important to also point out on the Spears residence that we are replacing, are we not replacing some of the trees?
Right, one of the things I was concerned of the Spears is providing some buffering between, not the road, the issue was the bike path that runs along the north side. And we were able to work with them to select a tree species that we think will do well to maintain some buffering from this new condition we're placing adjacent to their property.
With respect to utility burial, will that take care of existing overhead lines along Brand Road as we go west, or will there be more?
West is not part of this project,
Right.
But it's certainly something in CIP discussions we can discuss the timing and in comparison of that to other burial locations and those priorities.
Yeah, and part of what we try to do as we go through any of the CIP projects, knowing that it's council's goal to try to bury utilities as frequently as we can when it makes sense, both from the project standpoint as well as financially, is to look at each of these projects. And when we evaluated this project, it was something that we could do as part of the project, and it made sense. And because of the type of utility burial it is, it's not as costly as some of the other burials are, because they can direct bury versus having to put in the conduit. So that's why it made sense in this project to get the overhead utilities underground and clean up the area.
But nevertheless, it could cost in the neighborhood of $500,000.
There is a substantial amount of utilities in this area and underground utilities as well that are impacted by this improvement.
Right. I just wanted to point out, Marcia, that it's relatively inexpensive, with the emphasis on the word relatively.
Yeah. This one, because the type of burial is less expensive than some of the other utility burials that we've heard.
Right. Okay. Any other questions?
Sarah, just one more comment. When we widened Brand Road, I don't know how many years ago, 15 years ago, whatever, 12 years ago, there was 7 sugar maples that were on the northeast shoulder of that road. And we made it a point, because they were so beautiful, that when the road was widened, that they'd be replanted. And I can see that this is going to go right through them one more time. So I would love to see those things replaced again, because it sort of accents the curve of the road.
Sure, that's on the Distal Horse property where those are, and they're currently located right in this area. We've worked with Miss Distal Horse and have agreed to place 10 new trees of 1.5-inch caliper, minimum 1.5-inch caliper, in conjunction with the project. Because the pathway stretches all the way along her frontage, we're working with her on exactly where that would go. And in addition to that, there's landscape funds that are included as part of the project to address berming, curbing, things of that nature that's closer to the roundabout donut itself.
Yeah, it was just one of the more lovely aspects of that in the old Dublin, that row of trees bending around there. So I'd love to see that replaced.
Aren't the sugar maples the kind that tend to tear up sidewalks and bike paths? I'm hoping you're looking at something far enough away and consistent with our new policy of making sure that we're planting trees that don't tend to buckle the sidewalks and bike paths.
Right. Well, we do these projects. Something that's changed a little bit is how we do the species selection and working with property owners when the trees might be replaced on private property, because in this case, we don't necessarily have right-of-way wide enough all the way through to keep the trees there, as well as this is township property. This is not, this whole project is not within the city of Dublin limits. So in this case, we'll have a recommended species list that we'll share with the impacted property owners to gain their feedback. That recommended list is developed by the city forester and the landscape architect for the city. So some of those considerations are taken into account, as well as where the underground utility is located at, what type of potential environmental exposure there might be, because is it so close, is the slope such that there's going to be salt runoff, all of those kind of details.
If there are no other questions or comments, could I please have a motion to treat this as an emergency?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And if you'd call for a vote on the emergency?
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Thank you. And on the ordinance?
Mr. Keenan? Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
And Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Ordinance 44-13.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a real estate purchase agreement with Invictus Land Holding Company, LLC, for the purchase of 0.98 acres, more or less, in fee simple, located east of Riverside Drive, west of Tuller Ridge, south of Tuller Road, and north of Dale Drive.
Thank you. Mr. McDaniel.
Yeah, good evening. No change from the initial introduction at your last meeting. Just as a reminder, and there was a schematic in the staff report when this was presented before, this is a plus or minus 0.9 acres that would run on the south side of the proposed John Shields Parkway over between Riverside Drive and Tuller Ridge Road. We originally were looking at this purchase relative to the purchase of the Digger and Finch and associated property, but we had backed this particular green space out at that time because we were still working on the alignment relative to the proposed John Shields Parkway. Now that we have that set, I feel more comfortable going ahead and actually have the legals now for this purchase. So staff recommends going forward at this time.
Nina, I remember there's a traffic light proposed somewhere there on Riverside. Is that at John Shields? Or is that the next one up?
There would be a traffic light at John Shields ultimately.
And then what happens to the light at Tuller? That stays there as well?
That stays there, at least initially, but I think it would go to right in, right out. Was that part of the original plan? Yes,
Okay. All right.
at some point.
Well, that's
Yet
the
to be
access to the freeway for a lot of people.
Understand.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? And if you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? And Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ordinance 45-13.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to J.P. Morgan Chase Bank to induce it to locate an office and associated operations and workforce within the city, authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
Thank you. Ms. Gilger.
Good evening. No changes since last time, but to quickly recap, J.P. Morgan Chase continues to grow in central Ohio, and we'll be taking up 165,000 square feet at 5900 Parkwood Place later this summer. And the proposal before you this evening includes a $40,000 location grant and two-year performance incentives of 15% tied to two separate three-year leases. This evening, I do have Sean Bunt here, who's the Executive Director of Government Affairs with Chase. I'll invite him to the podium, and we're able to answer any questions that you might have this evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. I won't take up a bunch of your time. I know everybody's busy, but I just wanted to come in on behalf of J.P. Morgan Chase, just thank all of you for your leadership and hard work on this project. Thank you to the economic development team. You've done a great job working with us and been very supportive and understanding throughout the process. We sincerely appreciate the partnership with all of you and the city. And I think you should be very proud of the wonderful city that you guys are living and working here. And we're really looking forward to moving in and being part of the Dublin family. And I'm happy to answer any questions about J.P. Morgan or the facility or anything else that you guys want to talk about.
Will you be accessing our fiber network?
We're still looking at that. I know that was something when we talked about it. We're still talking with our technology group that really looks at that. And they've got probably some more questions that we need to talk to the city about, but we're not quite there yet. That's the real answer, but we're looking at it. And it's very attractive. I mean, a lot of some of the reasons that we looked at in choosing this facility was one, it's a wonderful community, and we like to be part of a good community. It's close to some of our other facilities. We need to look at this a little closer with our team.
Yeah, I was just listening to an international program on international finance and banking.
Yep.
And different communities, mostly in Europe, were setting up the basis on the speed of the fiber network. And Dana and the staff and his council's really been backing this for years. And it seems to be a big draw for international financial firms to locate in places that have a very advanced fiber network.
Yep.
And something I don't think we've utilized yet, but I was just curious, that was one of the reasons that perhaps you were moving here.
Not initially, no, but I think it's a wonderful, very attractive feature for a lot of different companies, including ours. We take data very seriously. We have a lot of it, obviously, being a bank, a lot of personal data that we take the protection of that data very seriously, and what networks they're on and who's watching that for us. So it's something we're going to take a very close look at, and we have some internal people looking at it now. We probably have some more questions for the city to think about it.
Great.
But I appreciate the question. I think it's a great resource. I do.
I'd just like to welcome you to the community, and as you know, I know you know that your company as a whole is very philanthropic minded.
Yes.
And we have a lot we opportunities.
I appreciate that. I was wondering if someone was going to let me get away with without that. No, we want to be part of. We spend about $5 million a year in philanthropic efforts in Ohio. It's one of our largest markets nationally. I mean, when we think about places where we are, Ohio is a very special place for the company. New York, we have the largest concentration of employees, then Texas, then Ohio. So it's one of what we think of as a central place for us. We have 19,000 employees here in Central Ohio. Polaris, Westerville, and Easton are the main, now Dublin, are some of our major facilities. So we have 23,000 people in the state, and we're the third largest private sector employer. So Ohio is very important to us. We spend a lot of time and efforts, and we'd love to connect with you guys. I know we're already working on the Dublin Festival, but we can, I'm sure, find other things to work together on. So I appreciate that. And I'll reach out to all of you and give you my contact information, so you can feel free to email me or contact me.
We have a bridge for sale, too, if you're interested.
I'm sure.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Chase has at least 3 branches in our community. Do I have them all covered, or is there another one?
I think, boy, that's
At least 3.
Yeah,
that's poor of me. I know the number in Ohio off the top of my head, but I think there's. Oh, thanks.
Is there a 4th
Leave
one?
it to the police chief. 4.
Yeah.
He knows where the banks
Glad
are.
somebody knows. Yeah, so, and I don't know if we have more plans for more branches, not that I'm aware of at this
I
time.
know Avery Muirfield, Sawmill, and France Road. Chief, there's a 4th one.
Kroger, inside the Kroger.
Inside, yeah,
Nice work, Chief.
yeah.
He gets in.
Leave it to Chief. He knows where all the banks are. He's just doing his job. But thank you very much. We're
No,
very
thank
excited
you.
about these jobs.
Yeah, me too.
Coming to the city of Dublin. Hopefully your experience has been such that, when there's a need for future expansion, that you will give strong consideration to adding those jobs here.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Look forward to the relationship.
Yeah, thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
I guess we need to have a vote now, don't we?
Yeah.
And if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to the first reading of ordinances. And I would move that we introduce ordinances 46-13, 47-13, 48-13, and 49-13, and to waive the rules of order regarding reading by title only, and ask the clerk to read the names of the property owners into the record. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. If we could have a vote on that motion.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
The property owners are Matthew S. Young and Tina C. Bauer Young, Janine J. Keeler Living Trust, Gretchen Distelhorst, and Brandway Limited.
Thank you. Ms. Ott. I'm sorry, we need an introduction, I guess?
Well,
Thank you. Ms. Ott, now. Thank you.
Good evening. These are 4 additional properties that the city's been in negotiations on for the Kaufman brand intersection improvement. After conversations with all 4 of these property owners, we've come to an amicable solution, and the details of the proposed purchase for both fee simple and easements is located in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about any of the individual properties.
Questions, comments? I would move then that we treat ordinances 46-13, 47-13, 48-13, and 49-13 as an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
If you'd call for the vote on that motion, please.
Mrs. Boring? Yes. Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
And if you call for the vote on the aforementioned ordinances.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker? Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
And Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Great, thank you. We are now at ordinance 50-13.
Rezoning approximately 12.05 acres located on the east side of existing Drake Road right-of-way to be vacated approximately 200 feet south of the intersection with Springburn Drive from R Rural District to PUD Plan Unit Development District. This is Stansbury at Muirfield Village PUD to establish an 18-lot single-family detached residential development and approximately 4.5 acres of open space.
Introduction, please.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Ms. Husak, whenever you're ready.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is the first reading, the introduction of this ordinance 50-13, and it is for a rezoning with preliminary development plan to a PUD and a preliminary plat for a 12.05 acre site. The site is surrounded by different single-family sections of Muirfield Village. The site there is outlined in yellow. It is 2 parcels. And currently there is a vacant home on the parcel as well as some outbuildings. Drake Road provides access there from the north off Springburn Drive. Here is the site again with the surrounding densities within Muirfield Village. During the Planning and Zoning Commission review of this proposal, and the commission saw it actually several times, the applicant has been working with staff throughout 2012 and then this year as well to provide different proposals to the Planning Commission, informally a concept plan review, and then also a preliminary development plan. And essentially, the Commission wanted to make sure that the density proposed would be similar or lower as those of the surrounding residences or residential areas, and that has been accomplished by the applicant. There was also feedback from adjacent residents at each of those meetings at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and those centered also around similar development patterns as the surrounding areas, as well as a lower density. There's traffic concerns, tree preservation, and those types of concerns. And the applicant.
Yeah, Mayor, I have to recuse myself from this debate because I'm on the board, so I will step out during this discussion.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're fine.
Thank you.
So the applicant has worked with staff to attempt to and really work with us to address those concerns by the adjacent residents. Here is the proposal that is before you tonight. The proposal is for 18 detached single-family lots. It's 1 lot less than what was proposed to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They wanted to make sure that each of the lots has a certain width, and so the applicant has decreased the density further and is now proposing 18 lots for a density of 1.5 units to the acre. The arrangement of the lots is a little bit clustered within the site. As you can see, there is a stream and then also a stream corridor protection zone that runs through the site, and there are requirements to keep a certain width of space open for that. The applicant is also there indicating in the green color to the north and the eastern edge of the site a tree preservation zone in which only clearing of noxious or dead vegetation would be permitted, and then the applicant would focus tree replacement in those areas as well, so that there would be a buffer established along the side of the site that is adjacent to existing residential homes. All of the open spaces proposed with this proposal is 4.5 acres in total, and the applicant is dedicating that to Muirfield Village, and Muirfield has agreed to accept that open space, and the responsibility of the maintenance would also be with Muirfield. Muirfield has also agreed to take in the proposal in their association as far as being a member of the Muirfield Association, and then also architectural review will lie with Muirfield. So with that, the Planning Commission has reviewed it. As I said, all the criteria are met, and they're recommending approval to City Council of the ordinance. They're also recommending approval with the 6 conditions that are on the screen, and they were also outlined in your memo. The applicant has addressed all of these conditions as part of the proposal before you. And then with this, it's also a preliminary development plan and a preliminary plat, and the applicant has also addressed all of the conditions that were imposed by staff and the Planning Commission as part of that. And we are recommending approval at the 2nd reading, which will be in June. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for Claudia before I ask Mr. Hale to come forward? Thank you, Mr. Hale.
Thank you. Ben Hale, Jr., representing the applicant. We have spent Bill Adams is here, who will be the developer. We have spent a good deal of time with the, not only with the Planning Commission, the planning staff, but also with Muirfield. And we thought the most prudent way to do this was to integrate this development. This was a piece of ground. I'm probably the only guy who was around. It was a big effort to buy this piece of property when Muirfield went in and just couldn't get it done. So we thought the best thing to do was to integrate it into Muirfield in every way possible. So we worked very hard with the Muirfield Association to get their permission, because this was totally at their discretion, to allow us to join the Muirfield Association, to dedicate the right-of-way to them, or the open space to them, and to join their association in terms of certain maintenance, and also to have them review the plans that will, of the houses that will be built here. So we're going to be subjected totally to their rules and regulation to make sure, and they've assured everybody that they're going to impose those regulations and make sure this is meets their architecture and development standards. I think today Claudia did get a letter from the association advising the city that in fact we had reached an agreement with them on all the issues that are there, and that they are in support of the development. The only other thing I want to say is that we have been, I think, as careful as you can possibly be about trees on this site, and the great majority of trees are in these open spaces. There are a number of trees, I don't know, Claudia, where you can, yeah, there's a cottonwood on 8, along between 8 and 7 that we're working with staff. We think we can preserve. There's a tree on 11 that's sort of in the middle of the lot that is probably going to be pretty tough to save, and there's one down at the corner of 13. Those are all landmark trees over 26 inches. The other landmark trees are all in the park area, but we're going to do what we can to preserve any of those trees. But we did want to point that out because I think there's great sensitivity in the city in terms of trying to preserve, any of the landmark trees that we possibly can. So we wanted to make that clear that we are working with staff, and we continue to work with staff to do what we can on those trees. Those issues, I'm sure when we get the final development plan, We'll go over those in great detail, but we just wanted to make it clear to you that that's what's going on. You know, we really worked hard on this. I think a real key is getting Muirfield on board and letting them join the association. I think the whole plan by Bill and by the Muirfield Association is you go out a little bit and no one will know that this wasn't done at the same time as Muirfield, except the houses are going to be newer. Bill is working with some really good builders, and the market that they hope to hit here, although houses are going to be pretty expensive, are they believe that a lot of these people will be empty nesters. They're going to try to have a lot of first floor masters and things like that. So they do believe that that's probably going to be the market. So we would hope you would support us, and we'll be back for the public hearing in a couple of weeks. Well, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Hale or Claudia? Going once, going twice. Okay, we will have the second reading at the June 24th meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Claudia. Ordinance 53-13.
Appropriating a 0.210 acre more or less fee simple interest, of which 0.203 acres more or less is present road occupied, and 0.015 acres more or less temporary construction easement from Dennis W. Richardson, and declaring an emergency.
I will introduce it.
Thank you. Ms. Ott?
Good evening. This is another property at the Kaufman and Brand Road intersection improvement. Let me just point out which one it is. We've had conversation with this property owner about the project and its impacts on his property. This property owner has selected to not return telephone calls as we've attempted negotiations over the past several months. And so at this point, staff is recommending going forward with an appropriation process.
This is an open field, right? I mean, there's not a house on this property, is that correct?
There is. I'll show you where it's at.
I don't picture this if it's next to Spears.
It's across the street from Spears. So we're talking about this property right here. Sort of a bow tie shaped piece.
So it's next to the Youngs?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the Young property right here. This is the Richardson property right here. This is the Wallace tract the city purchased last year.
It seemed like to me, this property often was rental property, was it not?
The owner has indicated in the past it was a rental property.
Okay, so the owner now lives in the property?
That is our understanding.
Okay, I just want to make sure we were notifying the right people, you know.
Certainly, yeah. So the majority of this appropriation that we're seeking permission to go forward with is for present road occupied. There's a small permanent right-of-way request associated for dealing with some grading and stormwater, as well as temporary construction easement. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And again, we're requesting emergency given the nature of the timing of the project and to ensure the improvements are done this year.
Any questions, comments? Hearing none, if I could please have a motion to dispense with public hearing and to treat this as an emergency?
So moved.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry. Thank you. You could call for the vote, please.
Mrs. Boring? Mr. Keenan? Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Thank you. And on the ordinance?
Mrs. Boring? Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
And Mayor Lucklider?
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to the resolution portion of our agenda, beginning with Resolution 31-13.
Adopting city council goals for 2013-2014.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Yes.
As stated, this is the resolution to adopt the goals. This is the same information that was provided in your packet the last time, and we've included the red line version so you can see the changes that we have incorporated in it. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those questions.
Questions or comments?
I just had a couple. The goal number 6, I don't recall the comprehensive conversation that we had at goal setting, so it caught me a little off guard. And I guess whether I have a question, maybe I have a comment more about it, is that, you know, are we considering it, it being whatever we grade, if anything, for the Bridge Street corridor area? What is the role in our dialogue that we are going to have surrounding this goal for the Recreation Center and the leadership there, the Arts Council, and the Dublin City School District? So it seemed to me that we need to be very holistic in our dialogue about whether this community needs this, and if so, for what purpose, and who all would participate in both the cost of it and the utilization.
Yeah, and I think part of the discussion was that the first thing we need to do is look at what are the models that are out there with regard to developing a cultural arts or performing arts center. And that once we have a chance to get some background information and review some of the different models, to present those. And I agree, it's something that's going to need to include all the different organizations as well as the community in general.
Right. And then my other comment,
Excuse me,
I'm sorry.
Mary Lee, I'm sorry. Just for purposes of recollection, at least this is my recollection, was that it was Vice Mayor Saleh who was,
Right, I
guess,
know she's
champion-
always been interested in this
Okay,
topic.
you knew that, I'm
Right.
sorry, okay.
And then my other comment is on Goal 1, the second paragraph, to continue to focus on and pursue international opportunities, et cetera. And this isn't for tonight, but I think it's really important, as a council member, I really need to understand what it is we have financially spent, what our goals are in this area of international exploration, and what is the result of any activities that we have already done and are planning to do in the next year.
Well, I think one of the, well, a couple things. First of all, we've begun to develop a lot of good relationships with consul generals from different countries such as Japan, Ireland, and we continue to look for those opportunities. The delegation from China that was here last year. Also, as part of the economic development budget, we've included funding that provides for foreign trade missions, and Dana attended, went along with Columbus 2020 last year to Japan, and I think one of the things we found out that he had a lot of contact with companies that were either currently doing some type of business with Dublin, had heard of Dublin, and so it was an opportunity to provide them with information, and then also met with companies who had not heard of us, and so it provided us with an opportunity to give those companies information as well. So we continue to look for opportunities where we can reach out globally to different companies that we know are within our community currently, or those that may be looking, as well as having good relationships with the different countries and representatives from those countries. But we can provide you with additional information.
Anyone else have any comment?
No.
Okay. And if you call for the vote, please.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mrs. Voorhees? Yes. Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Great, thank you. Resolution 33-13.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into an amended professional services agreement for law director services.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you.
This is simply what you voted on last time by motion. We put it in form of resolution and changed the name of my new firm. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comment, questions? Hearing none. And if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mrs. Voorhees? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 34-13.
I intend to appropriate a 0.201 acre more or less fee simple interest, of which 0.178 acres more or less is present road occupied, and a 0.036 acre more or less temporary construction easement from John L. Reynolds and Colleen M. Reynolds.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Ms. Ott?
Good evening. This is the final piece of legislation for the Kaufman Brand Roundabout on your agenda this evening. The Reynolds property is located in this corner right here on the eastern boundary of the intersection improvement. We have had conversations with Mr. and Ms. Reynolds since March regarding the project and have been going through negotiations. At this time, given the timing of the project and the status of negotiations, we think that staff is recommending to go ahead and provide intent of appropriations, and will continue to negotiate with the property owner, but given the timing of the intersection, want to be able to move forward as soon as possible.
Okay. I presume you are Colleen Reynolds?
Yes, sir, I am.
All right. And John?
He's back there.
All right. If you'd identify yourself for the record, please.
My name is Colleen Reynolds. I am the owner of 5151 Brand Road, and the person that Mrs. Ott is referring to is in communication with.
Yes.
I'd actually like to stand corrected. We have not been in communications with Mrs. Ott since March. I actually have the very first official communication that she delivered to me, which is dated April 12th. It was sent to our residence, which is a rental, so this did not get into our hands until a later date. So I would stand corrected that we have been communicating with her since April, not since March. We are negotiating in earnest with Sarah to offer her what she needs. We've offered a permanent easement for the non-PRO land that she's looking to acquire. We've also agreed to a temporary easement for construction so you guys can do what you need to do in order to progress this project along. Again, our information was delayed, so we are working with the timelines that are best in our interest to come up with the information that we need in order to reach an amicable solution. The information that we were actually given consisted of a bunch of comps which were not reflective of the property that they're trying to acquire, and therefore we were offered what we feel was a much lower market value for our property than we feel is worth. We have been spending our time in response to Mrs. Ott's offer, gathering information, again, on the acquisition of the land, on the cost of the trees that she would like to remove, as well as some other things that are inside of the counter. I sent a counter offer over to her in response to the communications that we've been having back and forth last week, at which time she's decided that we didn't have enough time to continue. She needed to put us in front of you today. So let's see here. I'm requesting that you delay passing the requested resolution today and allow us the time that we feel is necessary to reach an amicable solution, which we are on board to reach with you, Sarah. The timeline that I anticipate for us to be able to come up with an amicable solution is a week or less. The proposal that I put back and forth in front of Mrs. Ott was last Wednesday, I believe it was, June 5th. Again, we didn't have any communication with her since then, or we may not be standing here today. We may have had an opportunity to put together a reasonable negotiation, a reasonable deal. Let's see here, I'm sorry. Again, she's talking about taking our land, which is going to change the value of our property. Again, our intention is not to stand in the way. We've offered you an easement in perpetuity for the waterway land. Again, we would like to see the progress with Brand Road as well. We just want to make sure that it's fair and that it's equitable for all parties involved. Again, the comps that we were presented with were 5, 6, 7 years old. They were across the river in flag lots that overlook Riverside Drive off of Summit View. Again, we have been working to try to come up with fair numbers. I have since come up with properties that have recently sold on Brand Road, which is much more reflective of the accurate value of our property. I also came up with some comps up the road off of Avery and Celtic Estates, which again are improved lots, and I understand that that's why they sold for more. But I am asking again for you today to delay the passing of this resolution for a week, maybe 10 days, depending on how quickly Sarah and I can get together and talk. But again, John and I are on board. We would like to work this through, and we would rather it not be under a passing of a resolution. We like to do it amicably, as the other homeowners have had the opportunity to do.
Ms. Reynolds, if your comments, I think,
Please.
beg for a response from me anyway. A couple things that I would like to say. First of all, and I expect it's just, for ease of reference, but when you reference what Ms. Ott is doing, Ms. Ott is acting at the direction of the city manager, who's giving direction according to policy,
I understand
stated
that.
policy by city council.
She's the only one that I've had
I
communication
understand,
with.
but Ms. Ott is it's at the city manager's direction, which is according to our expressed policy regarding the improvements to Brand Road. So
Sure.
I know it's for ease of reference. She doesn't want to take anybody's trees in particular. She doesn't want to offer you an unfair price for your land and so forth. Also, our passage of this resolution, and if anybody would like to correct me, please feel free, but our passage of this resolution this evening will not preclude continued negotiations between you and the city with respect to this property and what you believe to be appropriate compensation. The reason for the passage of this and the other resolutions and ordinances is we've got deadlines, in terms of construction and so forth. So
Sure, I
that's why
understand
we're
that.
doing it. Mr. Smith?
If I could comment, please. The passing of the resolution is just something by statute we must do. That does not trigger our office filing an appropriation case. That would come at some time in the future with a authority from council for me to initiate an appropriation case. This is a document you have to get by statute. So we many times pass these resolutions, continue to negotiate. In fact, even after sometimes we are forced to file because of deadlines, we continue to negotiate. But there'll be no court filing after this. This is just something that's required by state law. Thank you.
Thanks. Is that a fair enough summary? Does any other council member wish to?
That's the statement of the law. I think that's very accurate.
Okay. All right.
I guess I just would say that regardless of what facts are truth or not, I really do hope, and it sounds like, that there is the ability to come up with some agreement here.
We'd like to.
That certainly is the intent of the city as well, because I think you participated in earlier meetings, and
Yes, we have.
People are really interested in the bike path and the walking path and everything, as well as yourselves that live there.
We support that.
Right.
Again, we support that. We were going back and forth over what we felt was, the appropriate compensation for our land, which again is, it's our land, so we don't mind working for the progress of the city, but we feel like we need to be fairly compensated.
Right. Thank you.
Oh, Mrs. Reynolds, are
Yes.
you now comfortable with what the law director explained, so that if we pass this tonight, that you're still going to be on the same negotiation level?
I'm sorry, you've caught me off guard. I would like to see the opportunity to continue to negotiate. Like I said, we're not dragging our feet. We'd like to come to an amicable solution quickly.
And that's what he has tried to explain to you, that even if we pass this, you're still on the same level ground that you have been before we pass this.
Excuse my ignorance for not being a lawyer, but can you explain to me what the necessity is to pass it versus allowing us the opportunity and putting it as a resolution in the future?
We have a deadline to begin this project, okay?
Sure.
And so we work backwards as to when we must have control of the properties. And by Ohio law, we have to give you notice in a formal document of our intent to take that property. Doesn't mean we're going to take it. I can't file anything until they pass something else in an open meeting that you would get notice of that authorizes me to initiate a lawsuit to take the property, okay? But this is just like a step. We had to send you a letter, okay? We had to be sure you had notice. We had to make you a written offer. These are all things that are prescribed by state law. So what we're doing tonight does not in any way affect our ability or your ability to continue negotiations. It is a procedural, not a substantive step. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat.
Okay, thank you very much.
So now I'm going to ask the question, what if we don't do this tonight, but wait till the next meeting?
And that would be our request.
Well, I think the main thing that we're trying to do is, in the event that we are not able to come to an agreement, which we're hopeful that we are, as well as Ms. Reynolds mentioned, but if we are not, we need to start the process so that we are in the position to be able to quick take the property. So that's why we're looking at the timing of this resolution, and then at the next council meeting, we would need to have an ordinance to appropriate the property. So that's it. We're just looking at a timing element.
Okay. I would urge you to pass this and allow us to continue negotiating.
Okay. If there are any other questions or comments, Ann, will you call for the vote, please?
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Great. We hope that the parties can come to an amicable, resolution.
Yeah.
Thank you. Resolution 35-13.
Waiving competitive bidding requirements pursuant to Section 8.04, Contracting Procedures, Paragraph C, waiver of competitive bidding for the construction of certain fiber optic routes, and authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Columbus FiberNet.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Mr. McDaniel.
Good evening. So as the staff report pointed out, we have 2 fiber optic projects that we would like to pursue. These would be funded through the 5-year capital improvement program. One has to do with the replacement of existing fiber optics that are generally in the area of Hard Road and along Riverside Drive. Those were in place in 2001 within the sewer line, but because of some issues with the sewer line, we want to pull those out and then pursue a sewer line replacement at a later date. And then project 2 would be to close the loop, so to speak, on the west end of the Dublin fiber optic system, generally in the area of where the Ohio University College of Osteopathic Medicine will be located, and run a line back over to Hospital Drive about where Dublin Methodist Hospital is in order to close the loop out there. Ohio University has expressed an interest in using the fiber optic system that's out there, which is tied into the Ohio Academic Research Network, and they've also suggested that they may participate in the funding of this project, so we will likely recoup about 50% of the cost of this second project from Ohio University. That's not been finalized yet, but we've had that discussion. The reasons for requesting you to waive competitive bidding in accordance with the charter are noted here and are listed, and I can go back through those if you'd like me to, but really the bottom line is we have one company that has designed, constructed, maintained, and managed the fiber optic system since its inception, and we've been very protective of that, and generally very protective of that because it is an active live wire with companies running on it. And because they have designed it, they operate it, they manage it, maintain it on a day-to-day basis, I would like to have no one other than them splicing and adding to and tapping into that and so forth. I feel confident that the cost per unit is within market based on what we had gone through with the Time Warner Hub communication project that came through about a year ago. Not quite a year ago, but we've been interacting with them on the extension of their fiber optics that they will do for that project, and I feel that the cost per unit is within market. So I would ask that you pass the resolution in support of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Michael?
Oh,
You're just ready for the vote.
I'm waiting to say yes.
Okay. Ann, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mrs. Maureen? Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to that part of our agenda designated as other. This is the acceptance of draft minutes and a report of the Tax Incentive Review Council. You going to speak to that, Ms. Miller?
Certainly. We had our annual Tax Incentive Review Council meeting on May 21st, at which time we reviewed all of our TIFs with the board. And I think just to give you a summary of what was discussed, and we did touch on these during our first quarter financial update, is that overall our commercial TIFs decreased in value 2.1%, and that was primarily driven by a reduction in one of our buildings within the Rings France TIF. Otherwise, we had 2 particular TIFs, the Bridge and High TIF that saw a 31% increase over last year, and then our Delta Energy TIF had an 82% increase over the prior year. In a nutshell, I think it's just important to note that with the TIFs that we've established, we have put in place over $101 million of public improvements. That has generated private investment of over $593 million. Certainly that private investment benefits all of the entities that receive our property tax dollars, and I think it just goes to show that our contribution in these public improvements within these areas is for the greater good within the city of Dublin.
Either John or Mary Lee, would you like to comment?
I just had a follow-up question. In our meeting, we had asked the reason for the substantial value reduction, And Ms. May indicated that she didn't know the reason, but would get back to you. Did she get back to you?
Yes, and I apologize that you did not get that. I will make sure that it's within your next packet. Unfortunately, the information that I received back was very limited. What it indicated was that the school district ultimately agreed with the Board of Revision's decision and the complaint was dropped. So,
But
when
what, I mean, what, okay, that is interesting to note, but for other reasons. But the question, I think, was posed right from the beginning, had nothing to do with the school district as much as it had to do with why did the evaluation be reduced by $11 million of that building?
Right.
That's what the answer was supposed to be about, not but about the what do you call it that they filed?
right.
You know.
Board of Revision.
Yeah.
Appeal.
The information that was provided simply indicated that on the complaint that was filed by the property owner, that the market value of that particular parcel had decreased $11 million. There was no other documentation provided that substantiated that. I will contact the Board of Revision.
Yeah, that's where the information would be.
Right.
There's a public file.
Yeah.
Right, and I
would like-
apologize that you have not
Right,
received
because
that,
we,
yes.
you know, we had a conversation about that, and I would have expected to know, how did they come to that, you know, amount? They, presumably, they do some kind of, I don't know this, but I'm assuming if you're going to reduce something that
Right.
substantially, you've done some kind of research that can be, is documented in this file as to why you did that.
I will have that for you in your next packet. My
And-
apologies.
And typically, when you're filing for a reduction, you obtain an appraisal and you submit that with your request for the reduction, so we can see if they filed an appraisal with their request.
When Nationwide left, did they leave at the end of the lease term? Do we know? So there wasn't any ongoing lease payments made at that point. So the valuation's really tied to the cash flow. I mean, that's my understanding.
Well, and a lot of the Nationwide employees that left were in a different facility.
Yeah,
than-
but I
than
mean, the
this
point
one.
is, if there's no further lease payments coming off of that, then that certainly impacts value as they look at commercial buildings. They don't look at it in the traditional sense of a house sale. They look at it
Right,
as
based
to
on
the
income.
income.
There's several factors, and
Yeah.
that's part of it, Mike. I'm interested to see what the position of the schools were, and that would be in that record.
It does
Yes.
seem odd.
Okay. Marilee or John, would you like to make a motion?
Oh, I'll make the motion to accept the Tax Incentive Review Council minutes.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And if you call for the vote, please.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Nitzy Zerker?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring? Mr. Gerber?
Yes?
Thank you. Another item under the other category of our agenda, it's the Community Services Advisory Commission items of interest. Ms. Crandall.
Yes, good evening, members of council. This is a combined list of the items of interest from the two former commissions. This list was reviewed by the newly formed commission at their first meeting in May. Staff is asking for approval of this list as presented. I can answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Comments?
You know, it looks like what we've been talking about having something really substantive agenda-wise. I would hope that rather than just having the staff give reports about their findings on these items, that we could engage the actual people on the commission to do some of the research themselves so that they can be reporting back to their peers.
And there was some interest expressed during their May meeting along those lines as well, so I think it'll be a
Right.
mix of both of those.
Right.
Michelle, is there anything that you'd like to add with respect to this list and its creation?
No, but we may at some other point during the year bring back some additional items of interest if the group comes up with them or staff does.
Okay, all right. Okay. If there's no other comment, Michelle, no other comment?
No.
Then I would move that we approve these items of interest
Second.
listed for CSAC.
Second.
And if you call for the vote?
Mr. Reiner? Mr. Keenan? Mr. Nitzy Zerker?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring? Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay. We made it to staff comments.
I have a few items. The first one, at the last council meeting, we had representatives from ODOT in attendance, as well as from our engineering staff that presented information on the I-270-33 interchange improvement project that the city's been involved in the past several years. And just to give council an update, this week at our MORPC board meeting, we will be voting on the additional funding that's been requested by MORPC, and we are of the belief that it will be passed on Thursday and that we'll be able to move forward with that project, and which will likely then mean at the next council meeting we'll be bringing legislation to appropriate some dollars for some of the detailed design that ODOT will be requesting that we submit sometime mid this summer to keep the project moving along in the time frame that's been discussed. The other item, just to recognize and thank all of the staff that was involved in all the efforts during and leading up to the Muirfield tournament. I think the city was presented very well for people coming into town, and for those of us who see it on a regular basis, it kind of is a week that you all probably pay a little more attention. And there's a lot of efforts from police services to clean up to sign shop, many staff members that are involved, and it takes a lot of effort. And I would just like to personally thank the staff for their efforts and to thank council for the support that we get each year that provides the necessary funding to be able to do those services and present the community in such a good manner. And the last item is an item with regard to a couple of positions and the review of the organizational structure. As we've discussed over the past year or so, I've had several discussions with different staff members looking at how we can best position the city to ensure that our maintenance of public infrastructure assets is performed and coordinated as efficiently as it can be, and also looking at this evaluation from the overall organizational structure as well as the operational levels from the divisions that perform those services. And the other thing that, in looking at this, is making sure that the organizational structure that we have in place is a sustainable structure, and trying to look at what does the city need not only now but in the next 5 to 10 years, and recognizing that over the past 30 years the city's invested millions and millions of dollars in the public infrastructure that we have. So we have significant miles of roadways, water lines, sewer lines, bike paths, pedestrian tunnels that we need to maintain and have systems in place to do that. And so with that, I requested that the Novak Consulting Group come in and perform some discussions and interviews with various staff members to look at and to get a good understanding of what we currently do, and then also to look at options that may be something that we should consider in going forward. So with that, and based upon that review, what I would like to request is that, given the importance of our infrastructure and the need to not only maintain the infrastructure but at the same time provide the day-to-day services that are necessary, that council approve or allow us to create the position of Director of Public Services. And under that director position, we would have the work units of streets and utilities, engineering, and parks and open space. And part of what we're looking at, similar to when we separated the city manager functions from the chief of police function, is to look at more of a traditional department director focus on our different areas, so that you can have a focus on defined areas. So we're hopeful that by doing that, you'll have a director of public services that is there, what they get up every day thinking about: how do we maintain and provide the services. I think the system that the city's had in place over the years and have created has served the city very well. But in looking at how can we keep the structure more sustainable, I think it's time to make some changes. It becomes very difficult in the marketplace to find people to fit some of the positions that we've created in the past. So looking forward, the hope is that this position will create something that is more available in the marketplace and will continue to serve the city as we transition from a growing building community to community that's still growing, but also a major focus on the maintenance of our assets and the operations of all the services that we provide. In addition to the Director of Public Services, I'd also like to request that we create an Assistant City Manager position, and this is to provide some additional project and management capacity in the Office of the City Manager. And currently, when Mike Epperson, who was the Deputy City Manager that left to pursue another opportunity, the functions and positions that he oversaw, we've split those between Michelle's current position, Michelle Crandall's current position of Director of Administrative Services and the City Manager's office. And so what I would like to do is request the Assistant City Manager position be approved by Council, and that Michelle's position be reclassified from Director of Administrative Services to Assistant City Manager, and she would continue to oversee the functions that she currently does, with the exception of Parks and Open Space, which would now be transitioned to the Director of Public Services. And one of the things that we'll continue to do, especially in the areas of streets and engineering and Parks and Open Space, once a new director is on board, that person will continue to review and work with the departmental or the divisional directors on what are some of the needs in those specific areas. So we see this as kind of a first step implementation as looking at what we need for the city going forward. I've also asked Tim Wagner, the Director of Human Resources, to review the positions and create draft position descriptions, and those have been provided to Council. Based upon our review, we've looked at the fact that these two positions should be in the leadership career band, which is level 2, and the positions will report directly to the City Manager and will be part of the executive team for the City Manager. And so with that, I would like to request and recommend that City Council direct staff to authorize the creation of the Director of Public Services and the Assistant City Manager position, and that to direct us to prepare the legislation to amend the compensation plan that would create those positions. And we will also begin preparing the changes that are needed for the organizational chart and bring that back to Council either the next meeting or a subsequent meeting. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that Council may have.
Marcia, for just sake of comparison, what other type of positions are in the leadership band?
It would be what is currently now the Deputy City Manager, Director of Economic Development, which will be the Director of Development, the Director of Finance, the Chief of Police, the Director of Human Resources, and then these two new positions, as well as the Clerk of Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If there are none, I move that Council authorize the creation of the Director of Public Services position and the Assistant City Manager position as described by the City Manager and consistent with the comments that she's made, and then assuming passage to direct staff to prepare the necessary legislation amending the city's compensation plan to formally reflect the position titles and pay grades. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And if you call for the vote?
Mrs. Boring?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lecklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Nizzi-Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then to roundtable. Mr. Keenan.
Just a quick thank you, to reiterate what Marcia had said with respect to all the effort by staff and everyone else for their help with the tournament, and just a lot of logistics, obviously streets and utilities, the police. It was a team effort from on the part of everyone, and community relations, and appreciate their help with everybody who comes to us constantly for, I need to get on the shuttle, I need to get in, I need tickets, and so on and so forth. And it's as painful for us sometimes as it is for you, trust me. So thank you for your effort.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rick?
Yeah, one thing real quickly. Marcia, I don't know, direct this question to you or to Paul, if he's still here. It's, we live on Dublin Road, and I see the signs are now up for the construction of the next phase of the multi-purpose path along Dublin Road, which is great. And And I've had some residents ask, the first part is, I understand this is going to take until up to August for that portion to be completed. But some people have asked, well, why do we have to close both lanes while construction takes place? And the next question is, well, okay, after this is completed in August, how about the rest of it? Will that be completed yet this year? And the third question is, will we bury the lines along Dublin Road like we're proposing at the Brand Road? Reason being there, as you know, those trees have been chopped up so many times, they barely look like trees anymore. So those are the three questions.
Well, first of all, to probably start with the utility burial, I mean, it is something that we look at, and the one problem that we have in this area is all the limestone and all the rock. So it's an extremely expensive proposition to bury the utilities
So you probably have to
in
encase
those
those, and
areas.
it'd be a lot more,
Yeah, and so that's one reason that we have not considered the utility burial in that area. As far as the next phases, we would look at, and our goal would be to have construction next year for this phase of the project. Once the next step is to begin negotiations with all the individual property owners on the easements that we need from them. And actually, this next step will be pretty difficult because of the number of trees and stone walls and things like that that are impacted by the project. But we do anticipate in our planning and programming our schedules so that construction on the next phase will occur next year. And I'll let Paul address.
And probably the only thing to add to that is we initially looked at doing 2 phases, and we've actually combined them into one last phase and figured let's attack it all at once. It's very similar in complexity as far as stone walls, trees, and placement of the path. So that was really the goal of doing it all at once. As far as the maintenance of traffic, we evaluated whether to close the road, whether to try and maintain one lane. And the difficulty with the project is there really isn't any place to stage materials, and to try and do that safely. Assuming you would do that in one lane, you still need to have access to those materials. So really, in summary, we felt for the safety of the construction workers, convenience to the public, it was best just to close the road, get in, get out, and not extend the duration of the project. And again, it's very difficult to try and maintain one lane of traffic. We might do that with temporary signals or flaggers, but in our experience, if we can do a closure, shorten that duration, folks seem to be much happier with us than taking twice as long and trying to maintain traffic through a work zone.
Sure. And that August 23rd date, I think that's the absolute last day that you're anticipating. It could go a little quicker, perhaps.
Correct. Yeah, this is not a difficult section to construct.
Yeah, it
so-
doesn't look like it is, except for the crossing at the bridge. But
Right.
It looks like
And-
it's going to be a prefab kind of thing.
It is. It's going to be a prefabricated steel structure similar to what we've used on other bike paths. So it'll build the foundation and then actually bring the structure in and set it at a later date.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks. Kathy?
Yes, I would like to thank staff for the reports they put in here based on our questions. The only thing I was disappointed with in the fence code discussion was that you did not end it like the sign discussion that said information only. So because you're requesting that planning requests further council action, I believe for me, my questions were answered, and I appreciate the thought and the research you put in there. So as far as I'm concerned, it's for information only, and that there is no more direction that is needed. Since I brought that up, and again, I thought you did a very nice report on that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, looking at things that were done 13 years ago. Amy brought up the sign questions, and I guess I would like to allow her to address this when she comes back. I have a couple of questions, though, right now. You mentioned that a temporary sign is limited to no more than 30 days in duration. Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Put your microphone closer, it'd help.
Pardon me?
Put your microphone
Okay.
closer. Thank
That the temporary sign is no longer than 30 days in duration. Well, how many 30 days can I have? If I have a for sale sign, or a big sale, or Christmas sale, can I have multiple 30 days?
You mean like a continuous 30 days?
Well, I give a month off so that, it would look like I'm attend,
We generally only do it once a year.
Okay. Generally, or?
Pardon?
Okay. And then you mentioned temporary window signs, that the use of the term temporary is so slowly used to distinguish these signs from permanently. So that is also the 30 days?
Yes.
Okay. I do have concerns about the Bridge Street district, because we're still kind of on this bubble about being sensitive with the building character and the limitation on sign size and number and all. I think I would like us to consider maybe looking at that if other council members are concerned. Of course, if they're not, it would not be worth the effort for you all to go through. I'm not comfortable with the way we're dealing with signs in the Bridge Street corridor right now. I think we should have more overview of it, or some type of, a little more preciseness, or maybe even P&Z type of overview. So, does anyone else have a concern? Okay, forget it. The other thing, thinking of reviews, we have now had one building approved for the Bridge Street corridor, is that correct? And we have mentioned that we would review the Bridge Street corridor standards on a regular basis. And now that we have something that came up, is it time for us to review? Did we say every 6 months, or didn't we?
Actually, what we've been doing on kind of continuous basis is, as we've been going through each of these projects, we've been kind of making a list of items that we think that need changing at some point. We kind of put them into two categories. One is eventually we'd like to get to, but we can work through interpretations for now. There's others that we think are probably have a little bit of higher priority. What we're really waiting for this time was to have that first really major project go through, where we could actually look at all the architecture and the landscaping and the street design and the Edwards multifamily project that's going through right now. That's really the first large major project we've had that we've had the ability to apply those portions of the code to. So we'd like to go through that review and see, after going through that, if there's other sections we think we'd like to look at as well.
When you say we, will you take that to planning and zoning, or will we have a joint meeting, or what's the intention here? Are the thoughts of that?
I didn't hear that, I'm sorry.
How would the review be completed? Would it be through P&Z? How would the review be completed? Would it be through council and P&Z?
I'm sorry. Yes, it'd be through our normal amendment process. We would, we haven't really mapped this out yet, but I would expect we would have a discussion with P&Z first to go over the items that we've been looking at in both of those categories, and see if P&Z, which changes they think are most appropriate to make. And then we would run it through the normal amendment process.
Do you have a time that you're thinking that that will take place?
How long?
Like, will it take place like in October or July or August? Do you have a time frame for that?
No,
I'm sorry, Steve, I understand.
I don't right now, no.
Okay. Can we establish something?
The Edwards project will be through our process by July. So we'll at least have some ability to go back and take a look at it through that period. So I would think in the fall we'd be able to have something going through.
Thank you. I'm done with you.
Sorry.
That's okay. Then one other thing that I thought was very interesting, and that was, Michelle, I appreciate you sending out the neighborhood recycling events. I hadn't realized that we were so comprehensive on that program. And I understand from talking with you that the neighborhood associations are very, very excited and very much in tune to cooperating with you. And again, another great program that we are offering to our residents. Thank you.
Thanks. Mayor Lee?
I'd like to just publicly, I know I speak for myself right this moment, but I'm sure everybody is in agreement at City Council, to really thank everybody on Brand Road, all the residents there and the owners of the houses there, who are, actively participating in the continuation of the building out of the bike and walking paths. I know that both they will take advantage of using them, but so will all the other residents in Dublin. And certainly we all appreciate their willingness to be positive and participate in that process. I also wanted to just comment, I do take the van for transport to the memorial tournament. And it was, I just want to say that I had different drivers. They were all fabulous. They were very accommodating to everybody that was using it, very personable. And I often engaged in a conversation with them. And it was really, everybody could hear the conversation and how proud they were of being a Dublin City employee. And one of the gentlemen commented to me that one thing he really loved about working here was that he was on this, what do we call those, snow warrior teams. And he said that when he talks to his colleagues in other cities, that he is always able to say that he has excellent equipment to use and that it's always kept in great service, which really makes their job much easier to do. And he really appreciates that and is wanted to sort of thank council and the leadership of the city for providing them with those kind of resources to do their job. I attended, until it started raining hard, the concert last night at Scioto Park, and it was really fun, and it was really well attended, and I really encourage everybody to go to these. It's a great opportunity that the Arts Council is providing, to the community to see great concerts at no cost to anybody. Then I had a question about, kind of along the line that Rick was bringing up. I tried to go through Brand Road, Highland Croy area the other day to go to 33, only to find I couldn't do it. And there were no signs that directed a detour. So I just turned around and went back Brand Road and went a different way. But I think we need signage there to tell people how to take a detour.
Well, I think the road didn't close till Friday, so that was the first day of the actual closure, and then the detour signs were uncovered then. So even though the contractor was working prior to that, the road was open, or the intersection was open. So that was the official day of actual closure.
I know, but I was on it Saturday, and
Okay.
that's what I'm saying, is that it didn't give me a detour option.
Yeah, that's
It
unusual.
just
We'll go
had
back and,
road closed.
well, we had a call from police also, unless some signs came up missing, and that's happened in the past.
Oh.
That could have been the culprit. So, so we'll look into it. But we did send staff out to evaluate.
If you didn't know the community, you wouldn't know what to do.
Right.
I mean.
Understood.
And then another thing that came up that somebody brought to my attention, and I hadn't really thought much about this before, but often we are involved in zoning approval for property, particularly in for residential build. And then after the developer gets their zoning, they sell it. They sell the property to some other developer. And so that the person that brought it to my attention was questioning that in not all cases, but in some cases, it's not the same quality of developer that they were anticipating going to have at those locations. And I'm wondering if, and I know we're not really informed of those changes either. Does the city know, I mean, the city knows because they have to come for permits and things like that. I'm wondering if maybe we could be informed when we've approved some kind of zoning, like I say, this is residential in nature always, and it's been sold to some other developer. Just because, we do get asked these questions, and not that we have anything to do with it other than just informational purposes, but we would be informed when this is occurring.
Yeah, we can, as those occur, provide that information. But the one thing too is all the zoning requirements would follow with the land, so.
True, but, right. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I just want to congratulate the city and those who served on the Dublin Grounds of Remembrance site, and that's probably everybody in this room in one way or another, for winning the ENDRA Award for Environmental Design Research Association. Announces that this was one of the Great Places Awards, so evidently somebody appreciated all the work that the city's done to make that happen. I want to thank the staff, because I was in Aladdin's the other day, for helping businesses prosper, because they've been given permission and they're still waiting for the final approval for the outdoor dining space. So they're really excited over there. So I don't know where that is in the process, but there's a lot of anticipation. So it's good that we're working with businesses, trying to help them be successful. The last thing I got is the President Cup banners are absolutely horrific. Right, you cannot read them. There's sort of this gold blur, and then there's so many details on it. There's American flags done in black and yellow, and the print's so small that they're really totally ineffective. I got my first complaint call on them tonight, but I already noticed them, as did my wife and a number of other people, I guess. So we might want to change these around, simplify them a little bit for the President's Cup so people can read them. And again, back to the other discussion we had, I think we want to remind people that this thing is coming in 100 days, is occurring in Dublin and not in Columbus. And this is what Dana works on all the time, and his staff, and Colleen. This is a great time to do some marketing with all these different people coming in from Asian countries. So it's a wonderful opportunity to get some banners out that really are reflective of the community. So I think that's where some of the money should be spent, really, on that kind of marketing.
Well, and Sandra can address this as well, but one of the things with regard to the signage and the information that's put up, that's the PGA's required signage, and we did work with them on looking at different options, but we are limited as to what we can and can't use.
Yeah, our design was quite different. I think our design reflected Dublin standards much more, and we've heard from people just what you're saying as well. It's difficult to know what those banners say. They're not necessarily designed for drive-by, and it works well in print, but that brand is hard to carry through, so we're sharing that information with them. And in terms regarding the marketing, we'll be, we met with you, we gave you some details, and so we're working on a couple of dollar figures, and we think you'll be really happy. We're hoping the next packet will have a lot of detailed information for you.
Yeah, really, Sandra, the things do not read. You'd have to be standing there still, looking up the post, trying to understand what that banner says. It's that bad. So if there's any chance to change those out under the PGA's requirements, it'd really be rather important. Thank you.
Point well taken.
Thanks. Anything else, John?
That's it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I'd like to add my compliments to the staff, all of city staff that supported the memorial tournament. Job well done. Everything seemed to operate smoothly and go well, and both our citizens, corporate and residents and visitors, notice your hard work, so it's appreciated. Do we need to make any kind of motion with respect to our meeting, June 17th? Or that will just show up on the calendar?
We'll just do a notice, as we would typically do.
All right, very good. Dana, could I get you to come up to this podium here, please? Sorry. Just like to take a moment to, again, recognize Deputy City Manager and Director of Economic Development, Dana McDaniel. As many of you know, Dana was in New York City last Friday. I know this is embarrassing, Dana, but in any event, it's recognition worth mentioning. Dana received from the Intelligent Community Forum, which is based in New York City, a Lifetime Achievement Award. And as many of you know, the City of Dublin has been recognized by the Intelligent Community Forum before. I believe we've been named a Smart 21 community at least 4 times. I think it was 2008 through 2011. We've been named a top 7 community at least twice. I think it was in 2010 and 2011. And, you know, in no small part, you know, Dana has been responsible for this recognition. And his vision some years ago with respect to the deployment of the state-of-the-art fiber optic network known as Dublin. With respect to the Lifetime Achievement Award, Dana is only the 3rd person to have been given this distinction. He joins Canada's William Hutchinson, who was recognized for founding the world's longest national ultra-broadband communications network, and the city, not an individual, of Sunderland, England, which gave rise to the intelligent community concept. Just to give you an idea of the company that Dana was in at this event in New York City, we know that you've been in good company throughout your career, whether it's that as a city official or now having achieved the rank of general in the National Guard. But at the head table, you shared the head table with the founders of the Intelligent Community Forum, the former Minister of Communications for Finland, the Premier of New Brunswick, Canada, and the founder of BlackBerry, I'm told. Thank you again for all of your efforts for representing the City of Dublin at this event and serving to bring this recognition, this international recognition, to the City of Dublin. So I missed the news somewhere, but who was named? What city earned that distinction of the Intelligent Community of the Year?
I can't pronounce the county. It was Taiwan, not the country of, but a county in Taiwan was named the #1 intelligent community. And first year they'd actually applied. And you know, Taiwan has a number of intelligent communities, and it was just phenomenal what they've done when you look at the populations and all those things that they have. And I think you'll find Taiwan to become an intelligent island at some point, because literally because the president of Taiwan was a former mayor who had received an intelligent community award, and I think his goal is to literally make Taiwan an intelligent island, so which is pretty cool. So anyway, but I appreciate the recognition and your acknowledging that. And as I was quick to refer when they brought me up for the award, that this was no single doing of Dana McDaniel, but really the vision of council and 4 city managers, who I tell everyone always gets it. And I could say that to my fellow intelligent community members who are and colleagues in the audience, and they all went like this because their communities get it too. So, but I certainly recognize and appreciate all the support, leaps of faith that you all have taken over the years to support that, and how this has really become a cornerstone strategy of our economic development strategy. And the 5 intelligent community indicators are really key to that, and something that we probably ought to continue to talk about. So anyway, but I appreciate the recognition by them, and I appreciate your recognizing that as well, and for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. In closing, if you'll indulge me for a minute, in light of the fact that I am nearing the end of my current term on council, I've given serious consideration to whether I will seek re-election to another term. This is a position that requires a significant commitment and dedication, and a decision to seek election should not be made lightly. Beyond the necessary commitment, I've asked myself, if re-elected, would I continue to make a positive contribution as a member of this council? I believe that answer is yes, but of course the voters ultimately will answer that question. It's been my privilege to serve with what I believe is the best council and staff in Central Ohio and beyond. I'm excited about what lies ahead for the City of Dublin, and I hope the voters of Ward 4 once again will allow me the honor of representing them. And I hereby announce my intention to seek re-election this fall. So, thank you, and we're adjourned.